Jake stood in the bustling hospital hallway, a mixture of excitement and nerves coursing through him. As a medical intern, he had grown accustomed to the chaos that surrounded him, but today felt different. Today, he would be assisting Dr. Ryan Mitchell, the attending physician he admired more than anyone else. Ryan was not just a skilled surgeon, he was charismatic, confident, and effortlessly charming. Jake had always respected him. But recently, those feelings had taken a turn towards something deeper. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting a warm glow over the busy nurses and doctors who moved swiftly through the halls. Jake adjusted his scrubs, feeling a rush of adrenaline as he checked his watch. He had spent countless hours preparing for this day, and he wanted everything to go smoothly. As he made his way to the operating room, Jake couldn't shake the fluttering in his stomach. He replayed the scenarios in his mind, trying to imagine how he would interact with Ryan. Would it be professional? Casual? Jake's internal dialogue was cut short when he turned a corner and nearly collided with Ryan himself. "Whoa, easy there," Champ Ryan said with a chuckle, his deep voice sending a shiver down Jake's spine. Jake felt his cheeks flush. "Sorry, Dr. Mitchell. I didn't see you there." Ryan smiled, his blue eyes sparkling with warmth. "No worries. You ready for today?" "Absolutely," Jake replied, trying to maintain his composure. They walked side by side toward the air thick with unspoken anticipation. Jake was hyper-aware of Ryan's presence, the way he moved with a commanding grace. They entered the operating room, and Jake felt a wave of professionalism wash over him. As they scrubbed in, Jake stole glances at Ryan, who was focused and serious, a stark contrast to the light-hearted exchange they'd just had. It was moments like these that made Jake's heart race. He admired Ryan's dedication and skill, but there was something else, an attraction that he could no longer ignore. The surgery began, and Jake quickly fell into the rhythm of the operation. He was fully engaged, but he couldn't help stealing looks at Ryan as he guided the team with expertise. Every time their hands brushed against each other, it sent a jolt of electricity through Jake. He fought to maintain his professionalism, knowing that any slip could jeopardize everything. "Scalpel," Ryan said, his voice firm and focused. Jake handed over the instrument, their fingers briefly touching. The moment felt charged, and Jake's heart raced. He was aware of the fine line they were walking, both drawn to each other yet bound by the unspoken rules of their professional relationship. As the surgery progressed, Jake's admiration for Ryan deepened. The way he handled pressure with calm authority was inspiring. But amid the excitement, Jake grappled with his feelings. Could he really allow himself to be attracted to someone in a position of authority? It felt wrong, yet so right. After a long and taxing surgery, they finally finished. Jake felt a sense of accomplishment as they stepped out of the OR, but the adrenaline was still coursing through his veins. Ryan turned to him, wiping sweat from his brow, and smiled. "You did great today, Jake." "Thanks, Dr. Mitchell." "It was a team effort," Jake replied, trying to downplay his pride. As they walked to the break room, Jake felt the tension in the air. The moment felt electric, charged with unspoken words. When they entered the break room, it was quieter, and Jake felt the weight of their connection pressing down on him. "Want to grab a coffee?" Ryan asked, pouring himself a cup. "Sure," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. They settled at a small table in the corner, and Jake felt a rush of warmth as he sat across from Ryan. "So how do you think it went today?" Ryan asked, leaning in slightly. "Honestly, it felt incredible. I learned a lot," Jake replied, his heart racing at the proximity. Ryan smiled, his gaze intense. "You have a natural talent, Jake. I can see you going far in this field." Mia felt a thrill at the compliment. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from you." Their conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter and shared stories. Jake opened up about his motivations for becoming a doctor, revealing his passion for helping others. Ryan listened intently, his expression earnest and supportive. But as the minutes passed, Jake felt the tension between them grow. The small gestures, the way Ryan leaned closer, the lingering gazes sent Jake's heart racing. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks, a mixture of excitement and fear bubbling within him. "Can I ask you something?" Jake blurted out, feeling a surge of courage. "Of course," Ryan replied, his tone inviting. "Why did you choose to become a surgeon?" Jake asked. genuinely curious. Ryan took a moment, his expression thoughtful. It's a long story, but ultimately it's about making a difference. I love the adrenaline, the challenge, and knowing I can save lives. Jake admired Ryan's passion, feeling a connection building between them. That's amazing. I want to make a difference too. Just then, a loud commotion from the hallway interrupted their moment. Jake felt a pang of disappointment as the spell was broken. They both glanced toward the noise, and Ryan straightened up, putting on his professional demeanor. I should get back to work, Ryan said, his voice shifting back to a businesslike tone. Of course, Jake replied, feeling the weight of the moment slip away. As Ryan left the break room, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. The connection they had shared was undeniable, but Jake felt a mix of excitement and fear. He had never felt this way about anyone before, especially not someone in a position of authority. The next few days passed in a blur. Jake found it increasingly difficult to focus on his work. His thoughts drifted back to Ryan, their conversations, and the tension that lingered between them. Each time they interacted, Jake felt the weight of his emotions pressing down on him. One afternoon, as they were prepping for another surgery, Jake felt the urge to confront his feelings. He could no longer ignore the attraction that had been building. Ryan, he began, his heart racing as he scrubbed in beside him, can we talk? Ryan looked at him, surprise flickering in his eyes. Of course. What's on your mind? Jake took a deep breath, steeling himself. I've been feeling something between us, and I think it's important we address it. Ryan's expression shifted, a mix of intrigue and concern crossing his features. What do you mean? I mean that I'm attracted to you. And it's hard for me to ignore, Jake said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. For a moment, Ryan was silent, his gaze intense as he processed Jake's words. Jake, you know the implications of this, right? We work together, and I'm your superior. I know, Jake replied, feeling a surge of frustration, but I can't help how I feel. Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've noticed a connection too, but we have to be cautious. I don't want to jeopardize our work. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of their conversation settle heavily between them. I get that, but I don't want to hide this anymore. Ryan's expression softened, and Jake could see the conflict in his eyes. I don't want to lose what we have, but I'm scared of what this could mean. As they stood there, the tension between them was palpable. Jake felt the urge to lean in, to bridge the gap that had formed between them, but he hesitated, acutely aware of the risk involved. Let's take it one step at a time, Ryan suggested, his voice low and measured. I can do that, Jake said, his heart pounding in his chest. In the following days, they continued to navigate their feelings, sharing fleeting moments of intimacy while maintaining their professional demeanor. Every brush of hands, every shared glance sent a thrill through Jake, but the tension of secrecy weighed heavily on him. One evening, as they finished a late shift, Jake felt a mix of determination and fear. He wanted to explore their connection further but was terrified of the consequences. As they walked out of the hospital together, Jake turned to Ryan. Can we talk about this again? Ryan looked at him, a hint of anxiety in his eyes. I think we need to be careful. I know, Jake replied, feeling the weight of his emotions, but I can't help how I feel. Ryan nodded, his expression serious. I care about you, but we have to be cautious. As they stood in the parking lot, the world around them faded away. The connection they shared felt electric, and Jake felt a rush of hope. They were beginning to navigate their feelings, ready to explore the possibilities of what lay ahead. Little did they know that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but for now they were ready to embrace whatever came next. The days following their conversation weighed heavily on Jake's mind. He oscillated between excitement and anxiety, fully aware of the fragile state of his relationship with Ryan. Each shift at the hospital was a test of will, a careful dance between professionalism and the undeniable connection they shared. Jake couldn't shake the memories of their last exchange. The way Ryan had looked at him, the vulnerability in his voice, it replayed in his mind like a favorite song. Yet, the reality of their situation loomed over him like a dark cloud. They had agreed to take things slowly, but Jake found it increasingly difficult to ignore the feelings swelling inside him. As he entered the hospital on a Wednesday morning, Jake felt a familiar rush of adrenaline. He had a busy day ahead, but the anticipation of seeing Ryan sent butterflies fluttering in his stomach. He dressed meticulously in his scrubs, trying to focus on the day's responsibilities while mentally preparing himself for their interactions. When Jake arrived at the nurse's station, he found Ryan already deep in conversation with a few colleagues. The sight of him, dressed in his crisp white coat, made Jake's heart race. Ryan's laughter rang through the air, and Jake felt a pang of longing. There was something magnetic about Ryan, a charisma that drew people in. As Jake walked closer, he felt the buzz of conversation fade, his focus narrowing solely on Ryan. "Hey Jake," Ryan called, his smile brightening the room. "Morning, Dr. Mitchell," Jake replied, trying to keep his tone casual. The moment felt charged, and Jake could sense the curiosity of their colleagues lingering nearby. They exchanged brief pleasantries, but Jake felt the pressure of their audience, knowing that any sign of intimacy could raise eyebrows. Throughout the morning, Jake found himself stealing glances at Ryan when he thought no one was looking. It was an intricate game of cat and mouse, sharing small moments of connection while maintaining the facade of professionalism. After a hectic round of patient visits, Jake was assigned to assist Ryan during a series of procedures. As they prepped for the first one, the tension in the air was palpable. Jake could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, heightened by the proximity of Ryan. "Are you ready for this?" Ryan asked, his gaze locked on Jake. "Always," Jake replied, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. The procedure began, and Jake focused intently on his role. He handed instruments to Ryan, their hands brushing against each other more often than he could count. Each touch sent a spark of electricity through Jake, igniting the longing he felt inside. Midway through the procedure, Ryan paused for a moment, looking over at Jake. "You're doing a great job," he said, his voice low and sincere. Jake felt his cheeks flush at the praise. "Thanks, I'm just following your lead." Ryan smiled, and for a brief moment, everything else faded away. The tension of the moment felt charged, and Jake's pulse quickened. Just then, the nurse called out for an additional tool, snapping Jake back to reality. As the procedure continued, Jake felt a mixture of pride and frustration. He wanted to lean closer, to bridge the gap that had formed between them, but he hesitated, unsure of how to navigate the complexities of their feelings. After the surgery, they stepped into the break room to grab a quick bite. Jake felt a surge of anticipation as they settled into a quiet corner. "I thought you handled that beautifully," Jake said, trying to keep the conversation light. "Thanks. It's always a team effort," Ryan replied, his gaze steady. Jake wanted to delve deeper into their feelings, but the weight of their professional environment felt stifling. "Can we talk about what we discussed last time?" Jake ventured, his heart racing. Ryan looked thoughtful for a moment. "Of course," he said, his voice low. "But we have to be careful." Jake nodded, understanding the weight of Ryan's words. "I know, but it's hard for me to ignore how I feel." "I feel it too," Ryan admitted, his gaze intense. "But the implications can be serious." "I get that," Jake said, feeling a mix of hope and frustration. "I just don't want to hide anymore." Ryan took a deep breath, his expression serious. "Let's take it slow. We need to be mindful of our positions." The tension hung in the air as they sat in silence, both processing the weight of their conversation. Jake felt a surge of determination rising within him. "I can do that. I just want to be honest about my feelings." As they finished their break, the atmosphere felt charged. Jake wanted to lean in, to close the distance that had grown between them, but he hesitated. The reality of their professional lives felt daunting, and the risks weighed heavily on his mind. In the days that followed, Jake found it increasingly difficult to maintain the facade of professionalism. Each interaction with Ryan sent his heart racing, and the tension between them grew palpable. They shared fleeting moments of connection and accidental brush of hands, lingering gazes but always in the shadow of their work environment. One evening, after a long shift, Jake found himself waiting for Ryan in the parking lot. He felt a mix of nerves and anticipation as he leaned against his car, the cool evening air surrounding him. When Ryan finally appeared, Jake's heart raced. "Hey, thanks for waiting," Ryan said, his smile warm and genuine. "Of course," Jake replied, feeling a thrill at their time together. They decided to grab a quick dinner at a nearby diner, a place known for its comfort food and casual atmosphere. As they sat in a booth, the ambience felt relaxed, a welcome escape from the stresses of the hospital. Over burgers and fries, their conversation flowed easily. They shared stories about their families, their dreams, and even their fears. The more they talked, the more Jake felt the distance between them closing. "Do you ever think about what life looks like outside of this?" Jake asked. His curiosity piqued. Ryan looked thoughtful for a moment. "I do. Sometimes it feels like I'm living in a bubble. I love being a doctor, but there's more to life." Jake nodded, feeling a rush of connection. "I get that. I want to make a difference, but I also want to enjoy life." As the conversation deepened, Jake felt a sense of vulnerability creeping in. "I've been thinking about us a lot," he admitted, his heart pounding. Ryan's gaze softened, and he leaned in closer. "I have too. It's hard to ignore the connection we have." The moment felt charged, filled with possibility. Jake could feel the heat rising in his cheeks as he met Ryan's gaze. They were both aware of the unspoken feelings that lingered between them. Just then, the waitress arrived, interrupting their moment. "Everything okay here?" she asked, her tone cheerful. "Yeah, everything's great," Ryan replied, his voice shifting back to a professional tone. Jake felt a pang of disappointment as the moment slipped away. They finished their meal, but the weight of their conversation lingered in the air. As they left the diner, the tension hung between them. "Can we talk about this again?" Jake asked, feeling the urgency rising within him. "Absolutely," Ryan replied, his voice steady. In the following days, they continued to navigate their feelings, sharing fleeting moments of intimacy while maintaining their professional demeanor. But the pressure of secrecy weighed heavily on both of them. One afternoon, as they were prepping for another surgery, Jake caught sight of Ryan in the operating room, the familiar rush of admiration washing over him. He watched Ryan interact with the team, his leadership skills shining through, and felt a wave of longing. As the surgery progressed, Jake's focus began to wane, his mind drifting to thoughts of their connection. He could feel the tension building between them, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to concentrate on the task at hand. After the surgery, they found a moment alone in the break room. The atmosphere felt thick with unspoken words, and Jake felt the urge to bridge the gap that had formed between them. "Can we talk?" he blurted out, his heart racing. Ryan looked at him, a hint of concern in his eyes. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I just want to be honest about my feelings," Jake said, his voice steady. Ryan nodded, his expression serious. "I think we need to talk about what this means for us." Jake felt a surge of determination. "I want to explore this connection, but I don't want to jeopardize our work." "Neither do I," Ryan replied, his gaze unwavering. "But we need to find a way to balance our feelings and our professionalism." As they sat together, the weight of their conversation hung in the air. Jake felt the urge to lean closer, to bridge the gap that had grown between them, but he hesitated, unsure of how to navigate the complexities of their feelings. In the days that followed, Jake continued to feel the pressure of maintaining their connection while managing their professional lives. The moments they shared felt precious, but the tension of secrecy weighed heavily on both of them. Finally, one evening, after a long shift, Jake felt a surge of courage. He was determined to confront his feelings and address their relationship head-on. As they stood outside the hospital, the cool evening air filled with anticipation, Jake turned to Ryan. "Can we talk about this again?" Ryan looked at him, a hint of anxiety in his eyes. "Of course. I don't want to hide how I feel anymore," Jake said, his heart pounding. Ryan's gaze softened, and Jake felt a rush of hope. "I care about you too, Jake, but we have to be cautious." Jake nodded, feeling a mix of determination and trepidation. "I can do that. I just want to be honest." As they stood there, the world around them faded away, and the connection they shared felt electric. They were ready to embrace their feelings, ready to explore the possibilities of what lay ahead. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind for Jake. The delicate balance between professionalism and the growing connection with Ryan was becoming increasingly challenging. Each day brought new moments of tension and excitement, and Jake found himself more and more consumed by his feelings for Ryan. They continued to share small, intimate gestures during their shifts, an accidental brush of hands, lingering eye contact, and the stolen smiles that felt charged with meaning. One Tuesday afternoon, while preparing for another surgery, Jake caught sight of Ryan in the operating room, confidently directing the team. The sight of him in scrubs, commanding respect from everyone around him, sent a thrill through Jake. He admired Ryan's dedication, but the intensity of his feelings was becoming harder to ignore. After the surgery, they retreated to the break room, both feeling the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Jake's heart raced as he sat across from Ryan, the air thick with unspoken words. "Can we talk?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ryan looked at him, a mixture of concern and curiosity in his eyes. "Of course, what's on your mind?" Jake took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I feel like we're walking a tightrope here. I don't want to hide my feelings, but I also don't want to risk our work." Ryan's expression softened. "I understand. It's been weighing on me too. I care about you, Jake, but we need to be careful." Jake nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. "I know, but I can't help how I feel. It's becoming harder to ignore." Ryan leaned in slightly, his gaze intense. "I feel the same way, but we have to be mindful of our positions. I don't want to jeopardize your career or mine." Their conversation hung in the air, thick with possibility and tension. Jake felt a surge of frustration, but also a deep desire to bridge the gap that had formed between them. "What if we set some ground rules?" Jake suggested, his voice steady. Ryan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Maybe we can allow ourselves to explore this connection outside of work, but keep things professional when we're here," Jake proposed. Ryan considered it for a moment, nodding slowly. "That could work. I just want to ensure we're both on the same page." As they discussed the potential of their relationship, Jake felt a renewed sense of hope. They were finally addressing the tension that had been simmering beneath the surface. However, Jake knew that navigating their feelings would still come with challenges. The following days were filled with stolen moments. Jake and Ryan would share quiet conversations during breaks, allowing themselves to explore the budding romance while maintaining a professional front. Each shared glance felt electric, a promise of what could be. One evening, after a particularly challenging shift, Ryan suggested they grab dinner together at a nearby diner. "Let's celebrate surviving another crazy week," he said, his eyes sparkling. Jake felt a rush of excitement. "I'd love that." As they sat in the cozy diner, the atmosphere felt relaxed, a welcome escape from the chaos of the hospital. They shared stories over burgers and milkshakes, laughter flowing easily between them. Jake reveled in the comfort of their connection, feeling a sense of freedom in Ryan's presence. "Do you remember when we first met?" Jake asked, grinning. "You were giving that lecture on surgical techniques, and I was just trying to keep my jaw from hitting the floor." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "I had no idea you were in the audience. I was nervous as hell." Jake leaned in closer, the intimacy of the moment amplifying the thrill he felt. "You handled it like a pro. You've always inspired me." Ryan's expression softened, and Jake felt a rush of warmth. "You have a lot of potential, Jake. I see great things for you." Their conversation turned more serious, and Jake found himself sharing his dreams and aspirations, his fears about the future. Ryan listened intently, his gaze unwavering, creating an atmosphere of understanding and connection. As the night wore on, Jake felt the tension building between them. They were both aware of the attraction that hung in the air, and Jake felt a strong urge to close the distance. Just as he was about to lean in, the waitress arrived with the check, breaking the moment. "Everything good here?" she asked cheerfully. "Yeah, everything's great," Ryan replied, a hint of disappointment in his tone. As they left the diner, Jake felt a mix of exhilaration and frustration. They had shared meaningful moments, but the unspoken desire between them lingered. Over the next few weeks, Jake and Ryan continued to navigate their connection carefully. They shared subtle moments of intimacy at work, but the pressure of maintaining a professional facade weighed heavily on both of them. Jake felt the urgency to explore their feelings, but every time they were on the brink of crossing that line, fear held him back. One afternoon, as they were prepping for another surgery, Jake caught sight of Ryan's determined expression. He admired Ryan's dedication, but the attraction that had been building was becoming harder to ignore. "Ryan," Jake said, his voice low, "can we talk about this again?" Ryan looked at him, a hint of anxiety in his eyes. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I feel like we're at a breaking point here," Jake said, his heart racing. "I don't want to hide this anymore." Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know, but we need to be careful. This is a complicated situation." "I get that," Jake replied, feeling the frustration rise within him. "But I can't keep pretending like nothing's happening between us." Ryan took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "You're right. There's something special here, but we have to find a way to make it work." The tension in the air was thick, and Jake felt a surge of determination. What if we take it to the next level, just outside of work? Ryan's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and contemplation crossing his features. "Are you sure you're ready for that? It could complicate things." "I'm ready," Jake replied, his voice firm. "I want to explore this connection with you, even if it means taking a risk." Ryan nodded slowly, considering Jake's words. "Okay, let's take it slow. But we have to keep things discreet." With their agreement, Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. They were finally on the same page, ready to explore the possibilities of their relationship outside of the hospital walls. As they continued to navigate their connection, the moments they shared began to feel more significant. Jake and Ryan met for coffee after shifts, exchanged text messages filled with playful banter, and found opportunities to be together outside the confines of the hospital. Each interaction deepened their bond, but the pressure of secrecy still loomed over them. One evening, as they sat in a quiet coffee shop, Jake felt a rush of courage. "Can I kiss you?" he blurted out, feeling the tension in the air. Ryan looked surprised, but the spark in his eyes gave Jake hope. "Yes," he said softly. Jake leaned in, their lips meeting in a tentative yet electric kiss. It was a moment filled with pent-up emotions, and Jake felt a rush of exhilaration. The world around them faded away, leaving only the two of them in that small cafe. When they pulled away, both breathless, Jake felt a sense of clarity wash over him. They had crossed a line, but it felt right. As they left the cafe that night, hand in hand, Jake felt a sense of hope blooming within him. They were finally embracing their feelings, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. However, the reality of their situation still weighed heavily on both of them. The following days were filled with a mix of exhilaration and anxiety. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that their relationship was under constant scrutiny. He noticed the curious glances from colleagues, and he worried about the consequences of their actions. One afternoon, while preparing for another surgery, Jake overheard a few nurses gossiping about a rumored relationship between two doctors. His heart raced as he caught snippets of their conversation, the weight of fear pressing down on him. "Did you hear about Dr. Mitchell and that intern?" one nurse said, her voice filled with intrigue. Jake felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "They say it's serious." He tried to focus on the task at hand, but the anxiety was palpable. What if their connection was discovered? The thought sent chills down his spine, but he also felt a rush of defiance. He didn't want to hide anymore. As Jake scrubbed in for surgery, Ryan's presence steadied him. They exchanged brief glances, the unspoken understanding between them providing comfort, but the pressure of the situation weighed heavily on Jake's mind. During a quiet moment after the surgery, Jake turned to Ryan. "What if people find out?" Ryan sighed, his expression serious. "I don't want to jeopardize what we have, Jake. We need to be cautious." "I know," Jake replied, feeling frustration rise within him. "But I don't want to keep hiding." Ryan looked at him, his gaze intense. "Neither do I. But we have to think about the consequences." As they spoke, the tension hung thick in the air. Jake felt the urge to lean in, to bridge the gap that had formed between them, but he hesitated, unsure of how to navigate the complexities of their feelings. In the days that followed, Jake and Ryan continued to share small moments of intimacy while maintaining their professional facade. They found ways to express their feelings in quiet glances and brief touches, but the pressure of secrecy weighed heavily on both of them. Finally, one evening, as they were walking to their cars after a long shift, Jake felt a surge of determination. "Ryan, we need to talk about this." Ryan looked at him, a hint of concern in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I don't want to hide anymore. I want to be open about our relationship," Jake said, his heart racing. Ryan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I care about you, Jake, but we have to be cautious. The implications can be serious." "I understand," Jake replied, feeling a mix of frustration and hope. "But I want to explore this connection with you." Ryan nodded slowly, considering Jake's words. "Okay, let's take it slow. But we have to keep things discreet." As they stood in the parking lot, the world around them faded away. Jake felt a surge of hope as they began to embrace their feelings, ready to explore the possibilities of what lay ahead. However, they were still faced with the reality of their situation. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, Jake felt ready to navigate the complexities of their relationship with Ryan. He was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together they could make it work.